Most men enter relationships believing that love is the foundation that holds everything together, and this belief feels so natural that it is rarely questioned. From stories, films, and cultural narratives, men learn that feelings are the core of connection, and that if love is strong enough, everything else will somehow fall into place. When problems appear, they assume that the solution lies in restoring emotional closeness, expressing feelings more openly, or reminding each other of what they once felt. This belief shapes how men tolerate imbalance, overlook warning signs, and invest effort long after a relationship has begun to deteriorate. Love, in this framework, is treated as a stabilizing force, a kind of glue that keeps the structure intact. However, love has never been the foundation of relationships. It has always been a byproduct of something deeper. Relationships function as systems, and like all systems, they rely on structure rather than emotion. When structure is present, feelings tend to emerge naturally. When structure weakens, feelings fade regardless of how intense they once were. This is where many men become confused and disillusioned. They feel love deeply and sincerely, yet they watch it lose its power to hold the relationship together. From their perspective, this feels like betrayal or emotional inconsistency. In reality, love is not designed to carry the weight men place on it. It responds to stability, direction, and internal balance within the system. When those elements are intact, love flourishes without effort. When they erode, love becomes unstable and unreliable. Understanding this distinction is uncomfortable because it challenges one of the most deeply ingrained assumptions men hold about relationships. But without recognizing that love follows structure rather than creating it, a man remains vulnerable to confusion, false hope, and repeated disappointment. What actually sustains a relationship is not emotion, but structure, and this is the part most men are never taught to see. Every stable relationship operates on an underlying framework made up of roles, boundaries, direction, and a clear sense of hierarchy, whether those elements are openly acknowledged or not. When this structure is intact, emotional connection feels effortless. Affection flows naturally, attraction remains alive, and love appears to reinforce the bond. When structure begins to weaken, however, emotions become unstable and unpredictable. Men often misinterpret this shift, believing that love itself is fading for mysterious reasons, when in reality the system that supported those feelings is breaking down. As a man loses clarity in his role, hesitates in his decisions, or begins reacting emotionally instead of acting with intention, the structure subtly collapses. The woman does not consciously analyze this process or frame it in logical terms, but she senses the loss of stability immediately. Her emotional investment adjusts accordingly, not out of cruelty or calculation, but as a response to what the system now feels like. The man, still operating under the belief that love is the foundation, attempts to repair the situation by increasing emotional expression, reassurance, or sacrifice. Ironically, these efforts often accelerate the collapse because they further undermine the very structure that once made love possible. From his perspective, he is giving more, caring more, and trying harder. From her perspective, the system no longer provides the same sense of direction and security. This disconnect creates resentment, confusion, and emotional exhaustion on both sides, until a man understands that emotions respond to structure rather than replace it. He remains trapped in a cycle where his efforts to save the relationship unintentionally weaken it. This is why relationships often collapse not during moments of conflict, but during periods of emotional imbalance that seem minor on the surface. A man may still love, care, and feel deeply connected, yet find that his presence no longer anchors the relationship the way it once did. As structure weakens, he becomes more emotionally reactive, seeking reassurance, harmony, and validation instead of providing direction. This shift is subtle, but it changes the entire dynamic. The woman begins to feel that she must emotionally compensate for uncertainty rather than relax into the system. She may become more critical, distant, or emotionally inconsistent, not because she wants to hurt the man, But because the relationship no longer feels stable in the way it once did, the man experiences this as ingratitude or coldness, especially if he believes he is giving more than ever before. He cannot understand why increased effort produces less connection. The truth is that effort without structure feels heavy rather than supportive. Emotional giving without direction creates pressure instead of safety. Over time, love becomes associated with obligation rather than attraction, and closeness turns into emotional fatigue. The man, still convinced that love should be enough, tries to restore what was lost by doubling down on emotional investment. This deepens the imbalance, because the relationship no longer responds to feeling, but to function. What once felt natural now feels forced. What once felt mutual now feels one-sided. Until the man recognizes that stability must come before emotion, and direction must come before reassurance, the system cannot rebalance itself. Love, in this state, does not disappear dramatically. It erodes quietly as the structure that once supported it continues to weaken. This is why the idea that relationships are built on love is not just inaccurate, but actively misleading for men who are trying to understand why things change over time. Love does not create stability. It responds to it. When a relationship has clear roles, direction, and internal balance, love feels natural and effortless, almost self-sustaining. When those elements erode, love becomes fragile, conditional, and unpredictable, no matter how sincere the feelings once were. Men often experience this as a painful contradiction. They love more deeply at the very moment when love seems to matter least. The mistake is not in feeling, but in believing that feeling can replace structure. A relationship cannot be held together by emotion alone, because emotion fluctuates by nature. What holds it together is consistency of presence, clarity of direction, and the ability to remain internally stable even when emotions shift. When a man understands this, he stops chasing emotional reassurance and starts paying attention to how the system itself functions. He recognizes that attraction and affection are consequences, not causes. This shift does not guarantee permanence, loyalty, or outcomes, but it removes illusion. Instead of trying to save relationships through emotional effort, he learns to evaluate whether the structure is intact or already collapsing. He becomes less reactive, less confused, and less dependent on feelings as proof of stability. Love, in this framework, is no longer a promise or a guarantee. It is a signal that reflects the current state of the system. When the system is strong, love appears. When it weakens, love fades. Understanding this does not make relationships easier, but it makes them intelligible. And clarity, rather than hope, becomes the foundation for any decision that follows.